Hello and welcome. We have a very informative and interesting show for you tonight. I'm talking with Phil Jenny, who is the Executive Director of the Minnesota Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. He is here to talk about the center, to answer lots of questions that I've been asking people about during the week that I'm bringing from the audience to him, so to speak. And I've learned a lot about the center as I've thought about tonight. 8,500 animals were cared for last year at the center, which Phil says is really more of a veterinary hospital for wildlife. 160 species in that 8,500, and it's been around a long, long time. One of the largest in the country, Phil, right?
Yes, we are. We were started in 1979, and we were a student organization at the University of Minnesota Vet School.
Oh.
And we were on campus until the late 90s, and at that time we split off as a separate 501c3 nonprofit organization, stayed on the university campus though for another 4 or 5 years, and then built our own facility in Roseville in 2003. So we've been out there for now, this is our 11th season.
I'm guessing some people who don't think hard about it might confuse you with the Raptor Center, which is also on the University of Minnesota campus,
right.
St. Paul campus.
Yeah, and actually we started about a couple years after the Raptor Center. The Raptor Center was founded by a couple of university faculty members, and there were vet students at the time who felt that there ought to be something in addition to raptors for some of the more common
other creatures,
backyard animals.
Right,
exactly. So
right.
we were started then in '79, and certainly for a long time there was the Raptor Center was much better known than we are, partly because of that, all of the work that the Raptor Center has done with the populations, with the peregrine falcons and bald eagles and some of the other more charismatic raptors that have now started, their populations are starting to rebound.
You work a little more with what we would call the common animals, right?
We do, although it's interesting.
But 160 species,
and in fact, yeah,
broad.
that's kind of average. Last year was actually even higher than that. It was like 180 or something. But but what's really fascinating about that is, yes, there's a lot of squirrels, there's a lot of rabbits, a lot of mallards, a lot of robins. But at the same time, last year we had about 75 different species where we only had 1 or 2 of that species in. So we see some really, really unusual animals, and some that are on the endangered species list.
What were a couple of the more unusual ones, in your opinion?
Last year, and what's interesting too is how much really churning there is. One year we'll get 20 different species that we didn't get the previous year, and then the next year there'll be 20 more. So there's actually, we've probably treated about 300 different species of animals. So just about everything. If it flies or crawls or walks through the state of Minnesota, we probably treated it at one point.
If it's an animal, it's been there.
But and you know, there's a lot of migratory birds. There's a lot of warblers that pass through, and there's like 35 different species of warblers that migrate through the Twin Cities. So the magnolia warbler, you know, you don't really see it in your backyard. We might get one every 5, 6, 7 years. Bobcats, we'll get a bobcat every couple of years. So it really, people will often ask, what's the most unusual animal you've had? And it really is. It's hard to say. Yeah.
I bet.
The little blue spotted salamander, which is about the size of your palm. Very interesting reptile, you know, so it's all over the map.
Now you've got a staff of 8 or 9, including some vets.
Yes, right, right.
And just sort of walk us through what a person would do if they see an injured bird or animal. Yeah, because you treat how many, 80 a day maybe?
Yeah, we're very seasonal, so that's one thing that really is different about us, in that we probably 80% of our patient load comes in from April until September, because so many of the animals that we see, about 65 to 70% of our patients, are actually babies. they're actually orphans, sometimes injured, sometimes the parents have been killed, sometimes abandoned. So that means that during the summertime, we're a little like those resort towns that have you know, the population
burgeoning
with
population.
50 in the winter and then 500 in the summer. That's a little bit the way we are. We have the 8 or 9 year-round staff members, but then during the summer months we actually go up to about 20 paid staff, and we have about 70 interns, students who are volunteers, and about 600 volunteers during the summer months. Now during the winter it backs off a lot. We don't have the interns, and we probably only have about 150 volunteers.
That's a lot of volunteers.
It's still a lot of volunteers.
For a small center,
exactly.
isn't it?
Yes, it is. And so it really will depend on what people encounter. You're going to encounter a different species in November than you will in June. So in June, for instance, a storm comes through and bird nests are blown to the ground and there's babies on the ground, or rabbits are found by people when they're the first lawn mowing of the season and they're out in their backyard, and all of a sudden they come upon this little nest of baby bunnies. So with almost all the baby animals, we ask the people, the client, to give us a call first and let us try to walk them through. Is it something that really needs to help? Because sometimes we can kill animals with kindness. We want to help so much that we'll go in and we'll swoop up these babies and we'll bring them into us when in fact the parents were nearby. They just were kind of leaving them alone, because parents in the wild don't often visit the babies in their nests because they don't want to attract predators. Conversely, in the wintertime, it's going to be an adult animal. Obviously, there won't be any babies left at that point, and almost always those animals are going to be hurt. If you go out in your backyard and you try to pick up a squirrel, you're not going to be able to do it unless it's hurt pretty badly. So we'll see a lot of large migratory birds, trumpeter swans, pelicans, geese, a lot of larger animals, and then what we're asking people is to call us so we can help them capture them, because it's not easy to catch
team
them.
Or a couple of people who go out.
We do not go and get anything. No, but what we do is we help
walk them through what to do.
Yes, we'll walk them through the process, and in many cases the animals are dangerous. They're hurt, so they can be more aggressive when they're hurt, just like any other animal.
Sure.
So we'll try to make sure that people don't do dumb things trying to help.
And people get if they get caught up in an injured animal's plight, they get very engaged in wanting to do something, don't they?
Yeah,
which is a wonderful human trait.
That's really one of the remarkable things about what we do, and it really, I think, is true in a larger sense with animals, whether they're our domestic pets, our dogs, or even the farm animals. A lot of times there's a strong emotional bond that people have with animals. So so rescuing the animal and bringing it to us often creates a real strong emotional response, and sometimes almost a possessive response.
I can imagine.
For my duck,
and maybe challenging to talk this over rationally.
Right.
I had an example once. I was at Lake Harriet, and a seagull got a fish hook in his throat, and these two little boys were trying to do something, and I got involved, and I was saying, somebody's got to go call somebody, we can't deal with it. And over the hill comes a wedding party, and I'll never forget, the groom, dressed in white, got real involved in trying to also help the situation. And his bride, who was so distraught because she said, "You're going to get all bloody? How can you be doing this?" Had just this horrible exchange with him. And it was just one of those things like out of a movie.
Yeah, that is funny.
But everyone was, as you said, very possessive of what to do now and what's best. And
right. What's best is to capture it and bring it to us, because we see a lot of that with birds, particularly water birds.
I bet.
Whether it's loons or swans or various egrets, herons, we see a lot of inadvertent injury from
man's
leftover stuff,
actions.
whether it's you're casting and your thing falls in the reeds and you snap it out. Well, then a bird might come along and ingest that. So
just thinking of now the practical question, let's say you come upon an injured bird, maybe can't reach you right away. A big sheet, a blanket,
right. Yep, you're exactly right. Because birds are really like ostriches, where if you cover their head, putting their head literally in the sand, they tend to quiet down and calm down some. So, and sometimes it might take, particularly if it's not injured badly, but maybe it can't fly, and it's a trumpeter swan with an injured wing. They're aggressive birds. So then sometimes it's a matter of several people with sheets kind of cornering it and then throwing it over.
A family or a group kind of approach.
It can be. And I think that's generally true. Usually the rescue operation, it's really back to what we were just talking about, tends to become a multi-person, and to me, one of the fabulous things, it becomes a family thing, particularly with the orphans. And the kids are out playing and they find something injured and they run in and they tell their mom and dad, and the mom and dad might not really want to deal with it,
but they get pulled in.
They get pulled into it, and in a way, that's often a situation that's hopeless, and our presence in the community really makes that a learning experience. The parents can actually then model compassion for the kids. They can actually do something about it. They can get out of the problem of the kids wanting to raise the animals or keep them, which is never a good idea. And then, and when you see especially in midsummer, you see the families coming up, and the little kids have got their little box and they're walking so carefully with the little animal that's inside, and they don't know what it is species-wise. All they know is it's something that it's getting some help, and their parents are helping them with that. It's a really, I think it's one of those fundamental things that actually can change a young person's life, and it can awaken something in them that they carry with all their life. Yep. Right.
I know I listened to an interview you had done on NPR before you came down tonight, and you talked about compassion, and a lot of people, I think, in the metro area do not feel much compassion for squirrels, probably for rabbits. They're doing things to their gardens and their yards.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
how do you kind of educate and counter some of those feelings of irritation when you're out in the public, Phil?
Well, I think what we try to do is really put it in a larger context. And yes, there might be too many squirrels. I don't know. That's not our job. We're not in the immigration business. It's really not up to us. You know, the DNR and other places worry about populations. What I try to do is to make somebody think a little bit more about it in terms of how it might affect them. And while there might be too many squirrels, I think it's really hard to argue that there's too much compassion. And that, to me, is the sense of it. And the other thing is we're an emergency hospital. And my favorite joke is to say, if something happened to me, I would hope that they wouldn't say there's too many old white guys and we're going to let them go. Well, there might be too many squirrels. I don't know. But
this
it
is
seems
ethics,
to me that
medical ethics.
That's right, that there's something hurt. And I don't know. We don't know a lot about animals and what they think and feel, especially wild animals. And I want us to be on the cutting edge of medicine. I want us to do the best that we can for what we know. But at the end of the day, it's really as much about us and how we relate to the animals. There isn't really much. The natural world is harsh, you know. It's like Thomas Hobbes says. It's nasty, brutish, and short. And I think that's true. And You know, my dog feels pain. I know he feels pain, but I know that he's not worried about the plight of dogs on the other side of the world. Mm-hmm. But as people, we have the capacity for empathy and compassion that I don't know, and I don't know if we'll ever really know, exists in the animal world. So I think as people, we have a duty and an obligation to share that compassion with the animals that really enrich our lives. And when you talk about that bond that we have, humans and animals have, it's rich.
When we think about philosophy and religion and compassion, you know, the biblical injunction to have dominion over the earth, I think has hurt the animal world quite a bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting, a really interesting. I've thought some about that, and I've always been interested in comparative religions. So in looking at many of the religions, animals do play different roles in each of the religions. But
think of the cow.
Yeah, exactly. But in most cases, there is even. You might say that what I said earlier about us being unique in the animal world and having compassion is a form of dominion, in a way. But I think that most cultures value animals, and it might be more sacrificial, but they do play a really strong role in how we perceive our world. And sometimes I think they might help us as guideposts as we move through our lives, or as our cultures move through the ages, in how we treat animals says a lot about who we are as people.
That's very interesting. The sea world problem, the aquariums, the dolphins, the whales. I know this is not your jurisdiction at all, but a comment from you on that in terms of your thought?
I mean, I'll probably get in trouble with my animal friends in the zoo world, but I don't like captive animals. I don't like the idea of an animal that is not free to pursue its life the way that its instinct tells it that it ought to. We made an early decision when I first started at WRC not to have education animals. Many rehab centers, the Raptor Center and a lot of other places do have education animals. And the idea is if you can take an animal out to a group of people, especially to school kids, that connection means something. And usually they're animals that are permanently injured, can't be released, but as far as we know, aren't in pain. And but we decided that wasn't our mission. That kind of education wasn't the education we were in. That it ran slightly adrift of our values of being able to treat animals and as often as possible release them back into the wild to be wild and free. So that's
the word "wild" is a very important word in many ways and at many levels here.
Yes, it is. Now, having said that, the Minnesota Zoo, for instance, does have the Minnesota Trail. Actually, has some animals that we did rehab that were unreleasable that are now living out their lives at the Minnesota Zoo, which is a wonderful facility. It's just that we're not in the business. That's right. We're not in the business to keep animals, and that's what it actually gets back to that point about loving animals to death too. We also see people who want to do the right thing, and they'll bring animals in, and they'll almost try to domesticate them. Oh, isn't that cute? And gee, I want one of those. And all of a sudden,
especially the babies,
the baby animals and raccoons, and some of the really cute ones. And all of a sudden, they're no longer wild. So and for me,
they don't do well, do they?
No, they don't.
They are in between two worlds.
That's right. And for me, that and our philosophy and our value system is that let the mystery be. We don't know what those what it being free is. We released some
it's
chimney
like.
swifts the other night, and somebody has asked me, well, where are they going to be going? And I say, well, they're going to Peru, and they're going to get there in a couple of days because they fly 45 to 60 miles an hour, and they weigh about the same as a couple of quarters. Now we can't think about that. Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it? Just mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's almost like looking at the stars. It's so
How do
overwhelming
we comprehend it all?
that just enjoy it for its awesomeness.
That's a great.
So.
And the word mystery,
Yes.
the word mystery, the word compassion is jumping out. Couple specific issues that I'm wondering what you think. The new Viking Stadium, the debate about what kind of glass and the migratory pattern.
Yeah.
How many birds may be at danger, in danger. What do you
Well,
have to
we're
say?
part of the Audubon, Minnesota started, it was called Bird Safe.
Right.
And we were one of the founding members, cooperating partners for that. And the initial program was called Lights Out, and that was just an effort to turn the lights down on skyscrapers overnight during migratory season. And many of the building owners in both St. Paul, Minneapolis, Duluth, Rochester, the 494 strip, all got involved in it. And in fact, what they found is they were saving a lot of money.
Right.
So they did it
win,
year-round. Yeah, so they're not doing it. So we were involved in that program, and one of the things that we also wanted to do was find out if bird strikes during migratory season are a problem, because nobody really knows. You hear these numbers between, 3 and 80 billion or whatever, and the spread is so much that it's meaningless scientifically. So working with the Bell Museum and Bob Zink at the Bell Museum, we actually tried to quantify it. And one of the things we've been finding is that there are what Bob calls super colliders, certain kinds of species that are much more likely to fly into windows than
those
other kinds of
klutzy
species.
people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So I think that the Mississippi flyway is one of the largest migratory bird flyways in the world. There are billions of birds that migrate down this corridor. And there's no question that there's going to be an awful lot of them that are going to be flying into the Viking Stadium. They can do what they want for the most part. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a PR mistake for them not to really embrace that. They are cooperating, from what I know, with Minnesota Audubon with the whole question of keeping the lights dimmed so that they won't be as much of a factor during the nighttime, because many of the migrants they fly at night and they navigate by the stars, and it's those light pools that confuse them. So they are cooperating on that, but I think it was one of those things that it's kind of, to me it was a no-brainer.
Kind of a value thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The herons that were their homes were totally ruined during the tornado a couple of years ago.
Right.
You worked with some of them. They've come back.
Yes, right.
That's a real success story, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a horrible thing, and yet it had all these really wonderful silver linings in it. In the midst of this tornado going through North Minneapolis and people's own problems, people were actually going down to the river at this heronry that was on an island, and they were pulling out. Most of the adults flew away, but the babies were stuck there, and most of them were dead. But there were some that were lying on the ground that were still alive. And these people who had their own problems, their garages with trees on it, were down there rescuing herons. And for the entire summer, some of the people from that neighborhood actually fished for us and brought in fish, because herons will eat 20 pounds of fish every day. So when you got that many herons for that many days, it can be quite expensive. So it was really a wonderful thing when we released, and we released 9. We saved, there were 10 that were rescued, and 9 of them survived to get released.
Wow.
And now those nests have been rebuilt, not on that island, but adjacent. So.
I'm sitting here thinking, I've got to have you come back because I have so many more questions, but I'm getting the wrap-up sign. For those of you who are also like me thinking, I have so many questions for Phil, Jenny here, we're going to put on the screen now the name of the center and their website, which is wrcmn.org, a phone number if you want to call and either talk to Phil or one of the other staff, 651-486-WILD, which is 9453, or his communications director if you'd like to email as your way of communication is tvogel@wrcmn.org. So keep those numbers and ideas in your head. Well, I know you can use volunteers, although you've got a lot. You can use donations. Obviously, you're not charging anybody for the work you do.
Right.
And you can use newspapers. And I thought, oh, that's something I could do.
Yes, yeah.
You need lots and lots of newspapers cut to certain specifications.
Right.
Which
we use those for the bottom of
all the
bird
cages.
Yep.
Yeah. And do you ever have, can people just come out, Phil, and look around?
No, they can't. They can come and look around, but they can't see any of the animals.
You don't have tours or?
No, we have an open house in February.
Oh, okay.
But at no time can members of the public come and see the animals.
Okay.
It's both against
because it's
federal.
A hospital,
it's
right?
a hospital, right? You don't go to the hospital and say, hey, let me see some sick people. But the other thing is with this is both federal and state laws prohibit the display of injured animals, because again, the idea is you don't want them to get used to people, you want them to be wild. That's also why we don't charge. The animals, wild animals, belong to the state of Minnesota, and so therefore they don't have a client.
So they belong to all of us,
that's
don't
right.
they?
So we can. That's why we ask all of you to give us money.
Well, it's a wonderful cause, a wonderful organization.
Thank you.
Phil, some of you may know, was at the Citizens League before this, so this is a major career shift, but
yes,
obviously you love it, and you've been there 12 years, so congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. We'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.